So thanks so much. Great to meet everyone. My name is Evan Riley. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of White Pine Renewables. We are a California-based developer of solar and storage, primarily for behind-the-meter projects, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. We've been in business since 2020, which I guess is 6 years now, and have completed a bunch of projects. Let's go to the next slide. And we can do the next. Okay, great. So this kind of explains who we are. We have offices in Fresno and in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we break our projects down into 3 different types. One is operational. That means that the project is built and it's in its operational phase of its life. That's typically around 20 to 30 years. There's 47 projects total. Roughly 30 are for water assets, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. You can see there's a mix of solar and storage. We currently have 10 projects under construction. And again, you can see that the percentage of storage is increasing compared to for the operational projects, it's about 15%. For what's under construction, it's about 1/3. And then you can see what's in development. This is projects that are in the permitting and entitlement and contracting phase. You can see that we actually have more storage in development than solar, which makes sense based on what's going on from a regulatory and policy standpoint, and then with the grid. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, one other thing. I am going to take a couple of opportunities to take questions as we go. So we don't need to hold questions for the end. If I could have the individual from LunchMAR, I think Marissa, if you want to just help call on people after I say, I can make myself available for questions, that would be great. And then we can kind of keep moving. But I do want to take questions as we go, as opposed to holding them all to the end. So what is a developer? What does White Pine Development really do? And then why White Pine? So the White Pine is the state tree of Michigan. And I grew up in Michigan, although now I'm a native of California. I have 3 children. Our whole family lives in California, so we're Californians. But I have some sentimental value for Michigan. It's the state tree of Michigan. So that's where White Pine comes from. What do we do? So what a developer does is, it can be different portions of the scope, but what White Pine does is the full scope. That means that we take an idea and we then go out and sign legally binding documents, which are agreements with stakeholders and counterparties that would allow us to build, finance, and then own and operate a solar and or storage project, typically co-located with load, that provides economic value to the energy buyer or the service buyer for the battery, if you will. And so that includes getting land. That can be purchasing land or leasing land. That can be filing interconnection applications, working with the utility, including paying for upgrades or doing upgrades to make sure that the grid can take the electricity, or that the grid allows us to charge the batteries. There's a whole entitlement and permitting process. Entitlements include title work. Oftentimes we're building on land not owned by us. And so we have to make sure that we're able to ensure that our rights to the land allow us to build the project and not have someone one day wake up and tell us to get off the land. And then EPC, that stands for engineering, procurement, and construction. That means building the project, getting it designed, and then built. And then savings and revenue, that's delivering value to all of the stakeholders. So that's really, that's what we do. Let's go to the next slide. This is just a brief list. It's not comprehensive. You can go to our website. It's www.whitepinerenew.com, all one word, or you can just Google White Pine Renewables Solar. And there's a comprehensive list of all the projects, inclusive of pictures that we've completed. So if you are curious, feel free to go to the website. This gives you a sense of kind of who our customer base is. So what you'll see is Wheeler Ridge Maricopa Water Storage District is our largest customer. We have two operational solar projects with them that sum to 15 megawatts DC, or a 15,000 kilowatt DC. And we contracted 5 battery projects with them, standalone storage projects that will be co-located along their canal to help reduce demand charges. It looks like probably 3 of those projects will move forward ideally. And then there's a lot of other water districts on here, water storage districts, irrigation districts, wastewater treatment plants. We've kind of called out which projects are ground mounted, which ones float. And then some of these are elevated and we sink water underneath them. So we call those dual use with a basin, and we'll show pictures of that. Other customers of ours are Vulcan Materials. That's a publicly traded rock crushing company. They crush rock and then sell it to make roads. Or nut growers like Olan Farming. They grow and process nuts, tomatoes, onions, and garlic, and what have you. And then a couple wastewater treatment plants. So theme here is lots of load in a small geographic area, and then in the state of California. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, a little bit more on what we do, and I think this is important to explain because there's lots of different business models, and it helps explain why we're working with the customers that we're working with. So what we do is we are effectively selling electricity to a customer by building a solar and/or storage power plant at their place of business. And in the state of California, you typically only have one energy provider because it's a regulated market. That means if you're in PG&E service territory, you're only buying electricity from PG&E. If you're in Marin, you may be able to opt into a CCA, but the CCA has a behind-the-curtain deal with PG&E, and in the end, everyone's paying PG&E. If you're an SCE service territory, you're paying SCE. So you don't really have a choice. What we're doing is we are providing a choice. And what we'll do is we'll sign an agreement to sell electricity or battery services for a set period of time. And then we come up with all of the money. We take all of the financial risk effectively. And then the customer or the host will pay only when the system produces energy. So it's a services-based contract. So if our project isn't working, they don't pay us. And what that does is it creates a really strong alignment of incentives. Whereas we want to sell electricity to our customer because we're selling it at a rate that is cheaper than the utility. And our customer wants to buy it from us because every kilowatt hour they buy from us is cheaper than the utility. And this is the same for the battery. We set up a similar arrangement called a shared savings agreement, or there's like different service plans. But effectively what you can see is before the White Pine project, you have a $100 electricity bill. Thank you, Gerald, for the accolades. And we'll talk about that in one moment. And then afterwards, we're able to offset here. It looks like roughly 25% of the bill is reduced. That means that every dollar that is paid to us, the customer would get $1.25 in value. And the difference between what they pay us for the electricity and the value that they get in terms of bill credits or a reduced electricity bill, that difference is the customer savings. And Gerald just said that this type of arrangement is perfect for public sector entities. And we found that it is. And that's kind of how we came into this business. We wanted to do power purchase agreements that had aligned incentives with our customers. I had previously done projects for utilities, solar projects in the East, where the customers just did not want the electricity for ideological reasons, even if it was going to save them money. And it just made it very contentious, where the customers, it would save their rate-based money, but they didn't want it because for various reasons they didn't want it. and it just became hard. So the reason that we started White Pine was because we wanted to sell electricity to customers that would save them money and just have aligned interests and just have it be win-win. And then generally public sector entities are not great for owning assets themselves because they have a mandate that's simply different. Like a water treatment plant needs to provide clean drinking water to the city of Petaluma or the city of Healdsburg. It's just not really in their charter to build a bespoke, unique, one-off, power plant that costs over $10 million and then own and operate it. In fact, they probably won't do that great of a job because the individual taking care of it won't have an economic incentive to. Whereas for us, if the project doesn't perform, we don't get paid. And there's a question here from Peter Fisk saying, do you find that some clients are only interested in solar and storage, not because it costs less, because it's also more resilient and reliable than the legacy grid? I would say that 90% of our customers simply want the savings. 9.99% of our customers want the green credits. They want the renewable energy credits. They want to be able to reduce their carbon footprint. So they want the other type of green, not the dollars green. And then 0.1% is interested in grid reliability and resiliency. The reason that it's so low, the percentage of people who want the resiliency, is simply because the cost of having a microgrid is very, very high. And everyone kind of likes the idea of a microgrid, and then you show them what it costs and the difficulty that it would incur, and then people say, I'll just save the money, don't worry about that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so real quick, just a little bit of nomenclature here. And this is probably, review for most people on this call, but it's important, so I wanted to just kind of explain it. So White Pine Renewables focuses on behind-the-meter projects. However, we have done in front of the meter projects. And so that would lead one to ask, what is the difference between behind the meter and in front of the meter? Or what is the meter, right? Like, what are we talking about here? So the meter is your meter, you being the customer. So if Lawrence Berkeley National Labs decided to do their own solar project, as they maybe already have, or maybe they will, or a battery project, potentially there's one or more, it's probably PG&E meters at LBNL. And if it's one campus, maybe it's all one meter. And what that means is there would be the choice for LBNL to install a project behind their meter, just like a residential homeowner does on their roof. So if you put solar panels on your roof, the solar panels connect behind your PG&E meter. And then what that means is when the solar panels are generating electricity, if you have lights on and your refrigerator's open and your air conditioning is running, and the load is greater than the amount of electricity that you're consuming, what the utility simply sees is less consumption of electricity because you're self-consuming the electricity that you're generating. The utility actually doesn't know that you are generating electricity and consuming it. All they know is that, oh, they're buying, 90% less electricity than they normally do at 2 p.m. on a very hot Tuesday in the middle of the summer. So that's behind the meter, and you can install solar panels and batteries and diesel generators and hydrogen systems behind the meter. The other thing that you can do is you can install it in front of the meter. Now, if you install something behind the meter, your only customer is the customer who's behind that meter, right? There's one entity behind the meter. That's the only person you can sell electricity to. That is what it is. Now, if you're in front of the meter, what you're doing is you're hooking your power plant up to either a transmission or distribution system. Here it shows you hooking up to transmission. We usually hook up to distribution. And then you have to legally, from a regulatory standpoint, get your electricity from where it's generated to customers who are going to consume it. And in the state of California, it's a regulated market. To do that, generally, there's it's called a monospony. And so typically there's only one buyer for electricity, and that buyer is the utility. Now, the rules are like, if you get access to the ISO, the independent system operator, then it's possible to sell elsewhere. But generally for White Pine Renewables, if we're going to do a project in PG&E service territory, it's typical that the only buyer is PG&E. And then PG&E buys from us at whatever, 8 cents. And then they'll resell to the customers at 40 cents, and then they get to pocket the 32 cents of markup. So based on that example, which is roughly accurate, you can tell that front of the meter is less interesting than behind the meter because it's difficult. The other thing is behind the meter projects have regulatory protections that effectively prevent a lot of the hurdles of getting projects built in the state of California, such as CEQA or discretionary planning approvals, zoning approvals, things that slow down housing, for example. Solar is exempt from a lot of that, and that's codified in state law. And if solar is paired with storage, the storage is also exempt from that, and that's codified in state law. So for all of these reasons, and then also if we're selling to PG&E, PG&E could buy from, a 2,000 megawatt gas plant for 4 cents, or they can buy from our tiny solar project, and we can't sell it at 4 cents and make any money. So why would they ever buy from us when they can buy from a huge gas plant? Whereas customers, the customer, their alternative is to buy electricity from PG&E at 40 cents. So if it's a residential home, which we don't do, we only do larger systems. But a home is a good example because everyone pays a PG&E bill or a utility bill. You know that you're paying 40 cents. So if I show up and I'm like, hey, I'll sell you electricity for 30 cents, it's a good deal. We have aligned interests and the project can work. And that's kind of what Gerald is saying in the comments. Okay. Any questions on front of the meter versus behind the meter before we go to the next slide? Okay, let's do the next slide. Okay, this is one other kind of like educational thing before we talk about what makes projects work and not. But we just have to have a foundation of knowledge and shared vocabulary before we can talk about what makes projects work and what projects not work. So the question is what is your electric bill made out of? Or if you're a water treatment plant, or if you're the Department of Water Resources and you have a huge pump and it's a PG&E pump and you take service at 24 kV or 21 kV, how do you get billed? The answer is there's a lot of different words on the bill and a lot of numbers, but you can bucket it into 3 different types. One is a fixed charge. So that is a per meter basis that the utility, PG&E, SCE, SDG&E, whoever, assesses you per month, regardless of what you do. You get charged $19.95 per month, regardless of when or how or if you consume electricity. It's just $19.95. I think there's a charge for Diablo Canyon on everyone's bill, and it just is what it is. It's $5 a month or whatever it is, $1 a month. That's a fixed charge. Behind the meter projects are not able to attack fixed charges. The only way you can get rid of the fixed charge is get off of the grid, effectively get rid of your meter and completely get away from the grid, which if you have a $5 or $20 fixed charge, it doesn't make any economic sense. The next type of charge is the volumetric charge. And this is the charge that most people are most comfortable with or understand. And that is, per unit of electricity, you pay X cents per kilowatt hour. And so if you pull up your bill, and your home bill, you're probably pay on a blended basis between 35 and 60 cents per kilowatt hour if you live in the state of California. And so the more energy you consume, the more you pay. So if you buy 3 kilowatt hours, 3 times 40, you pay $1.20. If you buy 4 kilowatt hours, 4 times 40, you pay $1.60. So the volumetric energy charges are really easy to understand. And then the rates, there's tiered rates. We don't need to get into that, but ideally it's just dollars per kilowatt hour. The other charge, which is more difficult to understand, is something called a demand charge. What a demand charge is the utility takes a set period of time, say a given month, And they then measure what is the most electricity that you consume in that given month. And that sets what we kind of call the high water mark. And that high water mark then is multiplied by dollars per kilowatt to assess a charge. So for example, if you consume 0 kilowatt hours of electricity for 30 days in the month, and then on the last day of the month, you consume 0 kilowatt hours of electricity. So you've consumed no electricity for all hours except for one. And on the last hour of the last day of the month, you then consume, let's just round numbers, 1,000 kilowatts of electricity for 1 hour or even 15 minutes. If you just say it's 1 hour, that means that you've consumed 1,000 kilowatt hours. If it's 40 cents per kilowatt hour, that means that you're paying $400 in your volumetric charges. But your demand charge is typically on the order of, depending upon your rate schedule, it could be $20 a kilowatt. And so if you have a 1,000 kilowatt consumption for 15 minutes or 1 hour, for 1 hour of that month, you take 1,000. That sets your high water mark. That was the high water mark. That was the most instantaneous power that you consumed in that month. You take 1,000 kilowatts, you multiply it by $20 a kilowatt, and you have a $20,000 bill plus $400 for the volumetric charges, plus $5 for your fixed charges. You have $20,205 or whatever it is. The point is that the demand charges can be extremely large, and the demand charges have been going up over time faster than the volumetric charges. And the way to think about this is solar can attack volumetric charges because solar generates electricity and you're not buying that electricity from the utility, so it can attack volumetric charges. Energy storage can attack demand charges. You don't know when the sun is going to shine, and you don't know when you're going to need electricity. However, with a battery and a smart controller, you can determine if you have a full battery, you can effectively pull from that battery before you pull from the grid. And there's a lot of smart systems and software that allow you to try and optimize and reduce demand charges. So again, let's review. There's not really a good way to attack fixed charges unless you get off the grid. Volumetric charges you can attack with solar. Demand charges you can attack with batteries. So let me kind of like stop and just take questions for a moment if anyone has them. Okay.
There's a couple
let's go to the next slide.
So I just wanted to highlight, there's a couple of comments in the chat from Richard McCann. I don't know if you.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So yeah, so let me address this here. Right. So CCAs, these are community choice aggregators. Effectively, what they're able to do is sell electricity volumetrically to different customers. And they'll buy electricity volumetrically, but then they have to pay transmission and distribution charges to PG&E. And so those charges are also volumetric. And they're able to like buy from people who have CAISO market access. It's a little bit complicated, but the point is like a CCA, you can break your volumetric energy charge into two different chunks: energy itself, and then transmission and distribution. If you're in a CCA, what you're able to do is generally then have that energy charge itself come from the CCA instead of from PG&E, which allows you to have a different energy mix. But you still have to pay the PG&E transmission and distribution, which is volumetric. And the transmission and distribution is typically higher than the energy charge. So a CCA, like, it's one step in the path of there being competition, but not really. It's just a little bit. And it helps because it allowed entities to sign more front-of-the-meter power purchase agreements, which got more projects built. There's a comment also from Richard on NEM-A, net energy metering aggregation. And what that is that's a way to, it's a program, and there's a lot of different programs, and I won't get into all of the programs, but net energy metering, and there's NEM-A, there's NEM-A1, NEM-A2, NEM-A3, there's a lot of different, there's RES-VCT, there's all these different things. But the point is for each of these programs, NEM-A being one of the programs, the concept is you could install solar, you can generate electricity. PG&E would, in general, give you credit for the electricity at the retail rate, volumetrically, that you could then use within a given year. So that's what net energy metering is. It says, hey, you can install solar, you can generate whenever you want to. So if you generate in the middle of the day, but you only use electricity at night, it's no big deal. You'll get credits that you generate in the middle of the day, you consume it at night. If you generate a bunch of electricity in the summer, but you only use electricity in the winter, no big deal. You can generate credits all summer long. And then when winter comes, you'll draw down on those credits. And that's what the net energy metering allows. It's kind of like an energy banking thing that, as Richard mentioned, has gone away. And I'll actually talk about in the example projects which ones are, what program we use, but we have done a fair amount of them. And yeah, Richard has mentioned that CCAs have added competition for generator contracts, which is true. But from a customer standpoint, like, you're still exposed to PG&E because they get you at the transmission and distribution charges, and like there's no way to get away from that. So that's what I mean. Like you underneath volumetric energy charges, you have energy and you have T&D, transmission and distribution. The creation of CCAs allowed for competition with PG&E in the energy side, but there's still no competition for transmission and distribution, and that's just something that's regulated by the state. And we can debate whether they do a good job or a poor job. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so real quick, this explains how we do our jobs. What we're doing is we are creating an idea, and on the y-axis we have risk. As risk goes up, it's more likely that the thing is going to fail, the project is going to die, and we're going to lose all the money and all the time. And it won't get built. What we do is over time, we spend time and we spend money to reduce the risk, to bring the risk down. As the risk goes down, the value goes up. So this is kind of like a standard cycle for project development. I used to teach a class at the University of Michigan Business School and Engineering School, and this was a slide from that deck. So the first step is an idea. You have to have an idea. I think that I can save this water district money by installing solar and offsetting their pumping load, by using the NEM-A program, for example. That's the idea. So that's extremely risky. I've invested very little time and money when I have the idea. And then what you have to do is you kind of go through and you assess the interconnection feasibility. Is the grid availability there? There's a process where you invest time and money with PG&E or the utility to figure that out. After you have, you can then sign a power purchase agreement or a revenue contract with the customer. And these can be in different order other than the idea. The idea really needs to come first. And then after that, there's a real estate entitlement process where you have to get the okay from everyone who has a real estate interest. You have to start your permitting process, use permits, building permits, what have you, your construction and procurement cycle, financing. Financing kind of occurs over a period of time, but that's generally making sure that you have enough money to get the thing built and that the sources of money are the correct sources of money to get something built. We're not going to go too much into financing. It's pretty complicated, but let's just say that not many projects get built with someone just having a whole bank account full of cash. Like, there's more efficient ways to deploy capital. And then COD is your commercial online date. Everyone celebrates. You break the bottle of champagne over a piece of steel. And that's first deliveries of energy, and then operations occur for about 20 years. So the three key pieces for a project are the siting, where does the project go, the interconnect with the utility, and then the power purchase agreement. After you have those three, generally you're going to be able to get the project done. Things that could trip a project up is if for some reason you can't get clean title to a project, meaning that you have a lease with farmer A, but someone has an economic interest in a portion of that land and maybe you need an easement from them and they won't give you an easement. Or for some reason you can't get the fire marshal to approve because you chose a Chinese battery instead of a Tesla battery. So this is it's a very quick overview on a slide that I typically spend 10 to 15 minutes on. Are there any questions before I move to the next slide? This is kind of the general order of operations, and it shows how as you invest more time and money, the risk goes down, and then actually the value goes up.
So again,
Okay,
there's
let's go to
a
the next slide.
question from Richard. Competition from which perspective? Did you already cover that?
I did, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I'll move on.
Okay. So how do you know if a project is viable? And that's we've kind of like covered our definitions. We've covered the order of operations very quickly. For a project to be viable at the highest level, the value that the project generates must outweigh its upfront costs plus its ongoing costs. And that's like a super important concept, is the ongoing costs. A lot of people think of these things as something that you can just build and walk away from. And I can tell you with confidence, being that we're repowering projects now, that if you build and walk away from the project will not work in a short period of time. So what is in the value column? So the value, and like, how do we know if there's enough value there? The most important thing is, this is what our head of analytics wrote. He wrote load, load, load. So like you have to have a lot of load. The more load you have that's co-located, the better. Like the more we're going to be able to work with. And that really comes down to economies of scale. The cost per unit of installing a residential rooftop project could be 4 or 5x the cost of installing one of our projects. And the more load that you have, the bigger project we can deliver, the lower our costs get and the more competitive we're going to be. So that's the volume, but then the shape also matters. If you have a load that's completely flat, it's really difficult for a battery to provide any value because the demand charge is what it is. But if you have a load shape, and that's what we call shape, that is equal to what I mentioned before, for 1 hour per month, you turn on your pump the full volume, and then you turn it off, like that is going to be a phenomenal project for a battery. It has very little volume, but it has a really good shape, and the battery can reduce the demand charges. So that's shape. That's kind of bullet 2. This actually really matters. The utility rate schedule and expected escalation rate. So historically, utilities in California over the past 5 years have been increasing rates at between 9 and 15%. But the question comes down to, what does the energy buyer, what is the person who has the load or the entity that have the load, what do they believe the future utility rate escalation will be? If they think that utility rate escalation is going to go negative, like we probably won't be competitive. If they believe that utility rate escalation will top out at 8%, we'll be competitive. 4%, maybe. 2%, probably not. We talked about exports. Exports are now less valuable than energy consumed behind the meter, so we want as few exports as possible. And then incentives really matter. The 2 incentives that I've outlined are the federal tax credits, which are going away for solar, and then property tax. So it's currently a property tax abatement in the state of California. That is also scheduled to go away at the end of the year. So the bottom line is the value matters, and the value is going down. And then cost. I talked about economies of scale for construction. Tariffs, I think we all know that there have been a lot of new tariffs that come and go. Tariffs increase the cost. It makes it difficult for the value to outweigh the cost. And then ease of permitting is extremely important. If we have stakeholders and counterparties that have permitting authority over us that throw up roadblocks, that adds cost, which makes projects not economically viable. And then lastly, how much does it cost to interconnect? So you need more value than you need cost. Hymar, or the other person who has his name, just asked, how do value considerations change by adding solar to groundwater projects? So the interesting thing is what you're doing is you are increasing value to the customer. Typically, our customers provide our land, and that has a cost to them. Sometimes we bring the land, and that has a cost to us. But if there's groundwater recharge basins or groundwater storage basins, those basins are already, their primary use is groundwater storage or sinking groundwater. If we put solar on top of them, our costs go up a little bit because we have to elevate our panels or we have to float them, which can make the costs go up a lot. However, effectively the land cost becomes zero. You completely reduce the land cost. So to Kamyar's question, how do value and cost considerations change by adding groundwater storage to a solar project? It's not by, like, the cost is going to go up a little bit, but your land cost should go to zero. And in projects where we put solar on groundwater projects, and the next slide is a couple examples of that, the benefits outweigh the cost. So let's go to the next slide, just aware of the time here. Okay, so here's 4 example projects. So Wheeler Ridge, Maricopa Water Storage District 1, this was effectively a NEM-esque project where we're generating bill credits. The credits can be assigned to 50 meters throughout Wheeler Ridge. They offset volumetric charges only, and Wheeler Ridge has 1 year to consume them. We actually had to go out and buy that land, which is always moderately terrifying, but Wheeler Ridge didn't have land, so we had to go buy it. And that came to them in the form of a higher PPA rate. North Kern Water Storage District, we have a portfolio of 3 projects with North Kern. The reason that North Kern agreed to do it, one, PG&E has been crushing them from a rate standpoint, and they pump a lot of groundwater in dry years. But 2, they loved that they were able to sink water underneath the panels. And so in some ways, like the blended cost for North Kern, if you truly compared it on an apples to apples basis, and it's really difficult to do because they wanted different things, like one has an escalator, the other doesn't, one has a longer term, the other has a shorter term. And all this is in the public domain. But if, like, you took Wheeler Ridge 1 and North Kern 3, which are the same project size, and put them side by side, North Kern 3 would be cheaper because we didn't have to go buy land. And then North Kern loved it because they got to sink water and have a cheaper rate. And then City of Petaluma, here we're floating solar panels on a partially treated wastewater pond, which is amazing. And if you smell it, you know it. And here again, City of Petaluma just did not have another option. Floating solar is extremely expensive. You get 30% less electricity per panel per year when you float compared to if you track. So there's always a huge incentive to track, but the pond was too deep and we needed to float. And it still made economic sense. So the value still outweighed the cost. And we were able to deliver that project to the City of Petaluma just a couple months ago, actually. That one, we just declared commercial operation. And then this last project or portfolio of projects, we're doing some standalone storage that I mentioned for Wheeler Ridge. This is along their Cross Valley Canal. We hope to get these projects done. We have the interconnect, we have the shared savings agreement, we have the site control. We're actually working with DWR right now collaboratively to, there's some sort of 3-way agreement or an agreement with Wheeler Ridge and DWR to make sure that putting the batteries where we need to put them near the Cross Valley Canal is okay. But that's a good example of a development risk. We have to make sure that every single stakeholder, that this is a win for every single stakeholder. If anyone stands up, any stakeholder stands up and says no, the projects die. And that it gets back to, like, every project being a miracle. We have some sayings, and these are values that are true at White Pine Renewables. We say that it takes a village to get projects done. and it does. None of these projects would get done unless every single stakeholder aligned and decided that they wanted them to get done. So it takes a village, and then every project is a miracle. For all of these projects, there's been a million reasons that they couldn't get done, but we've all been able to work together, the stakeholder group, because we want to think in it creatively and push forward to get them done. So let's go to the next slide. These are individual things on the projects, and I'll stop on a project level basis and take questions. Okay, Rick's got a good question. I think the next slide is North Kern. So can we go to the next slide? Okay, great. So Rick's question is, describe how North Kern panel foundations are constructed compared to a normal ground mount. Conveniently, the next slide shows the North Kern projects. So a couple of things that we had to do. This is racking design. The first thing that we had to do is ensure that the steel would be able to withstand being submersed in the soils, or we actually assumed that the steel was always going to be submersed. So what that meant is that effectively the galvanization on the piles was going to be thicker, and then the piles themselves are thicker. Each of these projects are 30-year contracts, and North Kern has the expectation, as do we, that we'll be able to get out to 35 on these. And so what that really means is we have thicker piles with more galvanization. The other thing that we've done is we've installed 2 panels in portrait. Panels are about 6 feet to 7 feet tall. So if you have 2 of them in portrait, that means you have 14 feet of panels. And generally, for every row of panels, if you have 14 feet, you then have 28 feet of clear row spacing. That's actually a really unique tracker design. There's not many people who sell trackers like that. So we had to do some custom engineering and find a very specific company to do that for us. What that allowed North Kern to do is get through the rows with a tractor to maintain their water basins. They sometimes rip to help water ingress. And they also want to mow or spray or whatever. So they wanted that, 24-foot plus clear row spacing. So design considerations included the type of tracker that we used, as well as steel. The other thing that's interesting is because the span on the trackers is 14 feet, when you can actually walk underneath those arrays. It's called the torque tube. It's something like 9 feet tall or 10 feet tall. It's pretty amazing, very cool to see. We're happy to provide tours at any time. So just real briefly, I'll go to the next slide. The problem, North Kern was having costs grow out of control. They have to deliver water to their customers. Their water costs were growing out of control. They had tried to install natural gas pumps, but natural gas prices are extremely volatile and the pumps are finicky. And it turns out that running natural gas generators is a thing unto itself. So North Kern loved our proposal to develop, build, finance, own, and operate these projects and simply sell them the savings. And their savings has grown way faster than we originally showed because the rates have gone up faster than they previously expected. Let's go to the next slide. We talked about Wheeler Ridge. They didn't have land. It's kind of the same story, except that they just simply didn't have land. So what we were able to do is we said, if you signed a contract with us, so both of the North Kern Water Storage District and Wheeler Ridge District projects are installed in the southern portion of the Central Valley, roughly within 1 hour of Bakersfield. They're both kind of in that general area of Kern County. And after we did the first project with Wheeler Ridge, they were so thrilled that we went and did a second solar project with them. And again, they were so thrilled about that. They're saving so much money. We then looked at some of their cross-valley pumps and realized that so long as we can get all the necessary approvals, including getting DWR to say, okay, we'll be able to save them money on their demand charges and help meet their electrification goals, so which they're really excited about. All of these projects have been great for Wheeler Ridge and the local growers in the community. It literally shows up in the competitiveness of the growers in those water storage districts, because their cost per unit food is lower because they're paying less per acre foot, because they're paying less for electricity because they have behind the meter solar and storage. Let's go to the next slide, just to where we're a little short on time here. Okay, this one's cool. So this actually shows one of the batteries that we're looking at, and it shows a couple of the battery projects. So these are the three that we're aiming to move forward with. On the right, you can kind of see where these projects are. This is just by the Grapevine when you drive over from Los Angeles up to Bakersfield. So we're just on the other side of the Grapevine. There's the Wheeler Ridge pump station and substation. So we're just coming off Tejon Ranch land. And then the Cross Valley Canal goes west. And these are booster pumps that pump water up the hill. And what these batteries are going to do is they're going to take the demand charges for those pumps, the peak demand charges, down to zero. And then we kind of have a design that kind of shows what they are. These are in development. They're not built yet, but we're really excited about these. So are Wheeler Ridge. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, well, so that's pretty much it. I did want to make sure that we left some more time for questions. I'm aware I think we only have 3 minutes left, but I wanted to get through the material and offer an opportunity to answer questions. Does anyone else have any kind of questions or comments? I know that Rick and Richard had some good ones, but I want to make sure that everyone kind of understands what we do, why we're working with water districts. It's one, a lot of load. Two, the PPA model works great for public service entities. And then three, high energy bills. I think it's something like 30% of the electricity in the state of California that's consumed is used to move water or treat water. People don't know that, but that means that it's kind of where we've found ourselves. And then why do we do co-located projects with groundwater recharge basins or floating solar? And the answer is usually because there's no other alternative. So some good questions from Rick. Compare floating panel cost to North Current elevated panels. Floating solar is roughly 2x the cost all in compared to North Current elevated panels. And you get 30% less energy per panel with floating solar. So you pay 2x as much and you get 30% less electricity. So if you want the same amount of electricity, you'll need to install 1.3x as much, which then costs 2x. So it's going to be 2.6x as much per unit electricity on a cost basis. So that's the answer to Rick's question. Okay, could you clarify DWR and water boards' roles in installing solar over or on water bodies? So the water boards, the water storage districts, the irrigation districts, generally they are the energy buyers. They are the customers. So what we're not trying to do, we looked at it and it doesn't make any sense to try and install front of the meter projects on water bodies and then sell the electricity to PG&E who's going to resell it to someone else, or sell the electricity to a CCA who's going to resell it. And then you have to pay PG&E transmission and distribution charges. It doesn't make any sense. And the reason it doesn't make sense is because there is enough land in America that you could just install the solar next to the groundwater recharge basin or next to the water body. So then the question is like, well, when and why do you install floating solar or solar on groundwater recharge basins? And the answer is, if the consumer of the electricity owns the water basin or owns the groundwater recharge facility, then it can make a lot of sense, because the energy can be consumed behind the meter. It's a lot higher value. You're able to attack demand charges with batteries. And you can provide a lot of savings in a win-win-win project. DWR would come in only if we would cross a canal that DWR had jurisdiction on. And then in that instance, we would need to have some sort of real estate agreement in place between, it would actually probably be between the water district that we're working with and DWR. And so what it comes down to is site control. Like DWR owns this canal. Maybe we need to put a line over the canal or a battery near the canal. And we simply need, and this is for Water District A. Water District A has an agreement that Water District A can install stuff for their pumping plants on or near the canal with DWR. There's an approval process where the Water District A needs to go to DWR and say, hey, I want to install this power pole or this battery or this line near the canal. Can you approve it? So that's DWR's role in approval, typically on or near water bodies. That's a good question, Chris. Any other questions?
Not seeing any other questions come up, and we are at time. So I am going to go ahead and close things up here. Oh, actually, there are a bunch of questions that have just popped up. Let's see.
I can take 2 minutes and answer them if it's okay, Marissa.
Yes, let's go over by 2 minutes. And this recording will be posted at some point so people can follow up. But yes, I will let you go ahead and respond to these.
Okay, so is there any consideration for reduced evaporation losses with solar? So the short answer is we actually partnered with a professor at Stanford, Dr. Megan Mauder. She's in the civil engineering department. She works with water districts. And we calculated the reduced evaporation because I had it in my mind that we were going to like monetize the reduced evaporation. And rough numbers, we were able to calculate if you float solar, how, like, what's the value of the reduced evaporation at $800 per acre foot. And the way that I would explain it is if the electricity is worth $100 per unit and the renewable energy credits are worth $10 per unit, so an order of magnitude less, the reduced evaporation is worth $1 per unit. So what we've found is we'll monetize the solar and the renewable energy credits, but we'll just give away the reduced evaporation to the customer. And, you know, they can figure out how they want to monetize it if so, or they just have more water to move. And so to answer your question, Andrew, yes, it's really overshadowed by the reduced energy costs by 2 orders of magnitude. And then it's overshadowed by the value of the renewable energy credits by 1 order of magnitude. Okay, Kamyar had a question. As some irrigated lands are repurposed to other uses to meet SGMA requirements, some are looking at using land for solar. Westlands, yep, I'm very familiar with the Golden State Initiative, or the VSIP land. Our solar contractors considering groundwater recharge dual use. So the Westlands Water District project, really what they're talking about doing is doing very large front of the meter projects that simply don't require water. And then being able to take those acres that are now planted with solar and that those acres have a water allocation and then move that water under SGMA to the other acres that remain planted. So if you need 2.4 acre feet of water per year to grow 1 acre of almonds and your allocation is round numbers 0.4 acre feet per acre per year, that means that you need to pull out 5/6 of all of your trees to grow 1/6 of all of your almonds. So what Westlands wants to do is effectively plant solar in those other 5/6 of the acres and move the water to the 1/6 and keep going. Some people have considered dual use for recharge basins. The hard part is that you really need the load to be co-located. And it's just hard. The other thing is groundwater recharge basins only pump during dry years. Some may never pump at all. They might just push water in to generate the credits like they're doing in Westlands. So it's very specific where you really need the right program. Like you need the right program is the short answer. It's hard to just co-locate groundwater with elevated solar without something like NEM-A or RES-VCT. Okay, and then I think Richard has some comments and he was hoping to talk. So I don't know if we can hand Richard the mic, Marissa.
Yes, Richard, you are unmuted.
Hopefully I show up. There we go. So, Evan, yeah, interesting presentation. It sort of took me a little while to figure out what exactly it looked like you were proposing. That's why I was asking all the questions. So it appears that you are delivering power to a single meter that has a large set of pumps attached, not to the meter, to a customer who has a single meter with a large set of pumps behind that meter. Is that right?
That's the ideal situation, or we're delivering electricity to a single meter that generates bill credits that can be applied to multiple meters. So it's one of the two.
Well, so in the latter case, so just to give you a little background, I've testified for the Agricultural Energy Consumers Association since about 1994. And I testified in the NEM proceeding on behalf of the agricultural parties. And the NEM-A credit, unfortunately, the December 22 decision effectively turned the bill credits into something roughly equivalent to the sale of PPA to other to the utilities, to either CCAs or PG&E, and and you don't get the credits for the reduced distribution charges with under the new current NEM-A. So that's why I was asking that question and why I was focusing on your first case where there's the large pump loads behind the meter. So, but like, do these customers have any kind of opportunity to take their their individually metered pumps, build a distribution system internally, which they can build for a lot less cost than the utilities, and setting up a single master meter at the front of collected properties, or is that option not available?
It's something that we're actually looking at for 2 districts and a couple of rock quarries. We were successfully able to do it at one rock quarry, and we got a PG&E approval for a small water district. But the large water district that we were working with, there's actually 2 super, like, really, really big districts that we were working with. PG&E has just effectively said, no, like, we're not going to allow you to do this. And what it's coming down to is, I think when it was just one small project, they're like, hey, okay, whatever. But when we, wanted to do this with one of the larger energy users in the South Central Valley, they kind of lawyered up, right? And they were just like, look, no, we'll fight you on it. And so it's a tough situation. And the short answer is like aggregating load behind a single meter provides a lot of opportunities for savings and value creation. And fundamentally, you need the utility to allow you to do it. And that means that you need them to say yes. It takes a village. Everyone has to work together. And if any stakeholder stands up and says no, the project doesn't work. And that's our experience so far. So we're still working on doing it. I would just say I am no longer optimistic that will be something that we do a lot of in the future, because the utilities have indicated that they're going to fight.
Yeah, well, and that's true. PG&E doesn't care about the village. They want to burn it down, from my regulatory experience. And they're doing a good job of burning it down. So yeah, I just was asking because I'm trying to think about where other customers might be able to use this, because unfortunately, with the way that NEM-A is set up now, it's not really that great of a deal to to do the co-located solar. You don't have
It
enough
doesn't
load.
work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. And with the property tax abatement going away, and then the ITCs going away, the federal tax incentives, and the tariffs. So solar panels in the U.S. currently cost 4 to 5x as much as they do anywhere else in the world. And they're like 3 generations old. So like if everyone in India or Bangladesh or Germany or Canada or Mexico has like an iPhone 18, like in the U.S., you're paying 4 to 5x as much for an iPhone 15 equivalent solar panel. And so if you have all of these things, like you have tariffs, you have no incentives, you have no property tax abatements, you have no more NEM, like it just doesn't work, right? So yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt the
Yeah,
conversation.
that's fine. I got my answer. So thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
well,
thanks
thank
for
you
your presentation.
everybody for staying on. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Evan, for the presentation. Sorry to cut off the great conversation. You're getting a lot of accolades in the chat. So once again, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, so many claps. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much again for presenting, and appreciate everybody for your flexibility. Wish you all a wonderful start to your new year here, and we'll see you all at the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.